From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Good evening, everybody. Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Gleason.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Great. We have a great opportunity to have our own District 1 lead us in the salute to the flag. Mr. Delamato, would you do us the honor of leading us in a salute to the flag? Please remain standing afterwards for a moment of prayer or meditation. Thanks.
Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Let me get my glasses. Okay, little not your typical board meeting. It's going to be focused on a review of public presentations to give the public an opportunity to talk to us. So we'll begin this with the first section with public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on the agenda. So the first opportunity will be for people to talk to us about things that are not on with specific regard to our budget, but any other thing you want to talk to us about. So it's reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on the agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct the staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. So I'll now open the opportunity for public presentations, and I see Mr. Fox. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dennis Fox. A couple weeks ago, you approved a request for a resolution in support of McClintock's bill to take care of the watersheds, kill the bark beetles, and hopefully save us from fire and flood. And this is a state, there's a state bill out there. You have the letter to them. And I wish you'd take a look at it and check it out for a while and maybe refer it. And the bill is, mainly it's to produce water, because places that have the watershed restored do not lose 10% of their water supply. When the water supply is restored, kept up there, the trees do not get stressed from lack of water and dry out. The beetles do not attack. And you do not end up, I'm mainly looking at the fires and the costs that post-fire problems. You have to buy houses. Too bad you can't take the houses that are in the freeway here and move them up to the fire-prone areas. But that's it. It's something to think about. I do caution, I'd like to have it take a look at, make sure that the watershed money goes to the watersheds and not to parks. There's an awful lot of parks in this state, and they were bought, and there's no maintenance funds for them. So, as I allude to in my letter, that they did rip it off. And that's something to look at. It's a caution. But I think it's been something to be looked at. And I see it do no harm. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. I have a letter from you to the Honorable Richard Bloom, Assemblyman of 50th Assembly District. That's the letter we're talking about?
Yeah.
Now, we have that, Mr. Nyland, do you have a copy of this letter?
We do, and Mr. Crowder is present to comment on that as well.
Mr. Crowder, great. Would you like to care to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Press that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The county administrative office would be glad to review this. We've looked at it. There are some, the opponents have some points to make as well. So we'll review this and bring it back to the board if we believe it is warranted.
Thank you, Mr. Crowder. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Thank you.
For your attention. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come on up. Please state your name and tell us what you want to talk about.
Good evening, Chairman and the board. My name is David Lamar Simpson, and I'm homeless. I've been homeless here in Bakersfield for a few years. I've been over there at the mission, sleeping in front of the mission over there. I had a service animal named Elvis that got stolen from me over there, and the city put him to sleep when the dog pound did catch him when I reported him stolen and took him to Mount Vernon Kennel and put him to sleep. Mr. Ricardo was helping me with this matter. And also I want to address about the mental health people that's over there at the mission sleeping on the sidewalk out front, because the staff over there, they think they're tweakers and on drugs, and they're not. What it is they're off their meds, and they're going through schizophrenia episodes, so they get laughed at and everything from the staff over there. Not only that, the staff also calls the homeless task force, the police, and they come out there and write tickets on them. I have 7 of them already. What are we going to do about this? I think as far as the animals go out in the shelters, I think therapeutic dogs will go a long way than adoptions. I think, they have a right to live. Just like my animal. My animal didn't bite nobody or nothing, but if some animal bit somebody or whatever, I could understand them putting the animal to sleep. And this has caused me real grief. I've been trying to get my disability and all that, and try to get funding and everything to get off the streets, and all I do is go around in a circle. I am in with mental health people over at 1600 Bell Terrace. I have a team with them. They try to do whatever they can to do. It's just the funding is, I don't know what the deal is with that, but it's really sad here in the city of Bakersfield, and we're supposed to be a great city, and I like to see it get greater. And in any help,
I agree with you completely.
if I can help in any way to make any suggestions to make this city a better city, I'm all for it, But my animal, it was taken from me, and it should have never been happened in the first place. And there's a lot of animals out here that people steal our dogs. That's what happened to me over there, because they wouldn't let me in the mission. And I have 2 doctor scripts for him, an ADA card, plus I went to GBLA to let them let me in so we could have a bed. You understand what I'm getting at?
Yes, sir.
But no, they throwed me out, told me my paperwork was all false. Even GBLA wrote them a nice letter. I have all the paperwork backing up what I'm claiming. So we chose to sleep out there in front. We figured it was a slave. But then we get harassed by the homeless task force police with the tickets and everything like that. We don't even have no money. I don't even have no money. You see what I'm saying? That's the only way I eat is up there at St. Vincent's de Paul. That's a good place for the homeless to go, But the mental health is what really bothers me. I see it because I sleep up there. I know. I ride the cardboard. And I see the people get taken advantage of. Even I get taken advantage of.
Sir, could you say your name one more time?
David Lamar Simpson.
Mr. Simpson, we just happen to have the Director of Mental Health sitting right behind you, and I'm going to ask him to come up and address the comments you've made in a general way. Would that be satisfactory to you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. If you grab a seat.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Walker?
How you doing, sir? Good.
Ms. Walker, would you care to comment? We had some interesting comments there. Could you comment on some of them, or give us some plan to address Mr. Simpson's concerns?
Certainly, whenever I hear a concern like this, Bill Walker, Director of Mental Health Department, thank you, Chairman Gleason, members of the board. Whenever I hear a concern like this, I think the best thing for me to do is to meet with this constituent, understand the story better, and actually assign some of our staff to work with the homeless center and law enforcement. We have some great collaboration to look into the issue and try to assist in any way we can.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I think that's a good plan. So, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Walker is going to sit with you, get your name and contact information, and we're going to work something out so we can address this problem.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one question of Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker, I believe he's talking about the rescue mission. I can't remember what the name of it is now. It's Mission at Kern. Or what?
Yes, sir.
It's the one by Sumner Street, right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So could you also make sure that we get enough information from him that we can interact with the rescue mission to make sure that there's not a disconnect there for the others that might be outside the mission, unable to get in for whatever reason?
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you.
Next up.
David Fluhart, Havilah First District. On the brighter side of things, we just had a wonderful Olympics. I liked that down in Rio, and it was very colorful, and we did good. And on top of that, yesterday when the sun started shining, Harvick won Bristol, so that was good news. And it's late August, which means going back to school, and that's always exciting for me. I'm oriented towards schooling quite a bit, and when the seasons change, it's good. Going back to school means football. Everybody likes football. I know Tehachapi and Taft and Bakersfield High, and just too many to really name. And interestingly, every 4 years, in the fall, there's the elections for politics, and every fourth year, the 12th grade government classes always get the I guess teachable moment to watch politics in action, and it's not on the agenda. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the politics works out this year. We've got two candidates that are gathering a lot of attention, and we'll see where it goes, and hopefully between them, I don't know. We'll see what happens. None of the stuff's on the agenda, and I just want to say I'm looking forward to the fall, football. I don't know, so many good things. And I just want to bring up some bright spots that we can look forward to when we're done with these meetings. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fluhart. Anybody else?
Good evening, Honorable Chairman and Honorable Board. My name is Curtis James Bingham, Sr., Street Evangelist for our Lord and Savior, God Almighty Jesus Christ, who truly is the only begotten Son of our Holy Heavenly Father, God Almighty. And I want to just thank the Board for having in God we trust up there. And it's a beautiful thing to see that the Lord is welcome in such a place. And I also would like to thank you for allowing people from the public to come in and have an opinion, considering this is one of the most powerful rooms that the public from all walks of life get a chance to come in. And me and myself, when you come before someone, we should know who we're talking to. And so with you guys being ordained by God, blessed by God, to be able to be put in great leadership, making great decisions, I just wanted to bless you in that right too. And pray, Lord, the Lord keep his hands on you and making your decisions. And I'm a great respecter of the law because the Lord said he's over the law. Is that okay, Honorable Chairman?
Yes.
Great respect of the law. And I just wanted to say that in every walk of life, every business, every association, we all need the law. You have a bridge, and every good, prosperous city, the bridge is usually the law. And so we want to keep our bridge in Bakersfield strong and the county strong, because if we start taking screws out of the bridge, it can cause a lot of problems. We have one situation going on right now with this new law. People know that they can steal as long as it's under $900, ain't gonna be no problem. So a lot of the stores is having a big problem with people just dropping items, running out the stores because they don't want to spend the time waiting for the law to come. Then we got those where we can use certain type of drugs now, and all you get is a ticket. So they're having a field day on that too. So we having a lot of new negative issues that are coming up where our law enforcement need all the help that they can get concerning the things that are taking place. And when you look at the most serious things, somebody's in the house maybe raping my wife, and the law can't get there for 30 minutes, or hey, somebody's hijacking my car, and the law can't get there for 15 minutes. Those would be some things that really would excite the people versus there's other things that are not as important. But I feel when we look at important things, we look at how important it is to try to make sure the law is able to get there on time, and be a blessing to us. So I just wanted to say, been a great respect of the law. When you look at the groups, the mailmen, the teachers, the bus drivers, and things of that nature, you don't see anybody being shot down in that area. But when the laws are just trying to catch criminals, you see a lot of them being shot down, being killed. And so I'm going to do everything I can as long as I'm living to promote the law, because the Lord said he's over the law, and they the only ones out there risking their life. And every business, every park, every building, every association, we need some form of the law. If somebody come down here acting stupid, it's going to take the law to come get them out. So I just want to respect the law.
Thank you,
for the law.
One of the laws is 2 minutes.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, Honorable Chairman, I thank you guys very much, and I thank you for the wisdom that God's given you guys to understand things that you never studied, and that's coming out of heaven to you guys. And I really honor you guys, respect for what you're doing, and thank you for allowing this opportunity. Thank you.
We honor you too, Mr. Bingham. Thank you very much. Anybody else for public presentations? Okay, we'll close that portion of this meeting, the public presentations, and bring it back to board member announcements or reports. Seeing none, we'll close board member announcements and move over to item number 3 under the County Administrative Office, public meeting to receive public comment on fiscal year 2016-2017 recommended budget. Mr. Nylon.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening.
Good evening.
We are pleased to present the fiscal year 2016-17 recommended budget for the County of Kern. Tonight marks the third public discussion regarding the budget. Discussions held on June 21st and July 26th provided my staff with direction to produce this balanced budget for your consideration. I would first like to begin with an introduction to the county's budget document. This is the third year my office has produced this enhanced public document that demonstrates best practices in budgeting to meet the criteria of the Government Finance Officers Association's award program. Kern County achieved the GFOA certification for this document last year. The comprehensive financial information contributes to public transparency and accountability and is intended to allow for better communication with readers regarding financial and operational matters. In addition to many charts and graphs, the document provides county goals and objectives, economic indicators, fiscal forecasts, and plans. The fiscal year 2016-17 recommended budget for all funds totals $2.51 billion, a decrease of $545.2 million from the fiscal year 15-16 adjusted budget. A significant factor of this change is the transition of Kern Medical Center from a county enterprise fund to a separate entity. The general fund, which funds most of the county's operations, totals $787.2 million, a decrease of $121.9 million, primarily due to the budget reductions taken by departments and reduced capital and major maintenance project funding. The budget supports a workforce of 7,682 authorized positions, a reduction of 1,693 positions. That is, again, primarily due to the Kern Medical Center transition. While the total budget of $2.5 billion is very large, your board has limited spending flexibility. Departmental program revenues comprise 85% of the budget, and that is the large slice of the pie, and includes fees, charges for services, subventions, etc., that are received by the general fund, special revenue and capital project funds, enterprise funds, internal service funds, special districts, and grant programs that are required to be spent on specific program costs, and as such, significantly limits your board's discretion over the use of those funds. The public safety departments account for the following amounts in this slice. DA, $18.4 million. Public defender, $7.5 million. DA crime lab, $1 million. Sheriff, $98.9 million. Probation, $54.9 million. And fire, $134.4 million, part of that large piece of the pie. Your board has the most spending flexibility over the general fund, but even that is limited. If you look at the slides that are exploded out, or the pieces of the pie, I should say, the bottom one is the countywide discretionary sources. And they are first obligated to pay for the required health and welfare mandated maintenance of effort contributions and other fixed obligations of $86 million. And as such, your board has no discretion on its use. Your board has limited flexibility on $251 million for services such as the assessor, auditor, tax collector, clerk of the board, sheriff, probation, district attorney, etc. Flexibility for these programs is limited because many functions are mandated, but not always at a specified level. And finally, the smallest slice of the pie is the portion of the budget where your board has full flexibility on resources allocated to departments such as Parks and Recreation, Veteran Services, and the Board of Trade. For fiscal year 2016-17, this totals $43 million, or 2% of the total recommended budget. This is probably one of our most important slides, and it talks about our budget gap. At the two previous public budget discussions, your board has been advised that fiscal year 2016-17 county budget for the general fund and fire fund have budget deficits. The general fund deficit was $44.5 million, of which only $15.3 million is mitigated through the 5% net county cost reductions by different departments, leaving an outstanding concern of $29.2 million that must be resolved in order for the budget to be financially and fiscally sustainable. The fire fund's deficit was $17.5 million, of which only $9.2 million has been mitigated through reductions, increased property tax revenue, and a general fund contribution, leaving an outstanding future concern of $8.3 million that will also have to be resolved in order for the fire fund's budget to be fiscally sustainable. The combined outstanding deficit balance of $37.5 million for the general and fire fund has not been permanently resolved and must be considered if your board is considering funding for other departments or issues that are brought before your board. The general fund, as the major operational fund for the county, is often the main focus of budget development, as the majority of funds are discretionary and therefore require the most consideration by your board. The recommended budget includes countywide discretionary revenue of $334 million, which is comprised mostly of property taxes and sales and use taxes. The general fund had a fund balance carry forward of $41 million, and the budget has nearly $18 million of use of reserves. These sources, combined with departmental program revenue of $394 million, which includes fees, charges for services, and state and federal aid, equates to the general fund budget of $787 million. Let me direct you to the far right column of the slide. Property-related revenue of $246 million accounts for over 74% of countywide discretionary revenue. These revenues have been affected by a reduction in oil and gas property valuations in the county. Sales and other taxes totaling $52 million are the second largest source of discretionary revenue at 16%. Sales tax revenue is declining as a result of lower auto sales, slower building and construction, and the continued decline in fuel and petroleum prices. Other revenue of $35 million consists of net interest earnings, countywide cost plan charges, and state and federal aid. While fiscal year 16-17 is the lowest in the 5 years presented, and we see a precipitous decline over the last 3 years, we do anticipate that fiscal year 2017-18 will be similar to fiscal year 2016-17, thereby hopefully flattening out this curve. This chart provides a 10-year history of the county's assessed valuation, and let me direct your attention to the far right column again. The fiscal year 2016-17 recommended budget anticipates a 4.3% decrease in the assessed valuation of properties within the county, the lowest level in 5 years. This is the second year of assessed valuation decline, which was 8.8% in fiscal year 2015-16 related to oil and gas properties. The declines have resulted in property tax revenue losses over 2 years totaling $77 million for the general and fire fund combined. The current percentage of total assessed valuation for oil and gas is the lowest it has been in over 20 years. Spreading the deficit equally to all departments, including public safety, was recommended to maintain a similar funding ratio that the board has developed and supported in the previous years. On this slide, the solid portion of each bar reflects the main public safety departments for sheriff, probation, district attorney, public defender, indigent defense, and fire. The top pattern portion is all other budget units, including those that are fixed obligations of the county. Spreading the reduction equally at 15%, excluding the fire department, public safety receives 55% of the available resources, and all non-safety departments receive 45%. If non-safety departments cover public safety plus the remaining deficit of the fire department, it would require up to a 58% reduction to those non-safety departments, resulting in a new allocation of resources, shown by the bar on the right, totaling 65% of all resources to the 5 safety departments and the remaining 35% to the remaining 36 budget units. To make this happen, my staff would need to further analyze the minimum statutory requirements of each non-safety department to determine how this could be applied without violating the law. During the budget development process, non-safety departments were required to submit lists of major impacts that would result if a 25% reduction in net general fund costs were implemented in this fiscal year. Some of the major impacts, and this is just a very brief summary, includes animal services and library services, 2 of the most public-facing non-safety departments. However, service level impacts at 58% at the bottom, that reduction for non-safety departments would be devastating, including those services that are provided to children, seniors, and veterans. The county would be unable to meet the minimum required or mandated function for many departments and could be considered to have their mission compromised. Recently, there's been some discussion about the Proposition 172 revenues. Public safety departments are also the benefactors of the Public Safety Proposition 172 revenue. You may recall that the purpose of this sales tax revenue stream is to help backfill local governments for the loss of property taxes to the state's Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, or as we know it, ERAF. In recent years, public safety departments have benefited from increased allocations attributable to one-time use taxes on solar and wind construction projects. As these projects are reaching completion, the sales tax revenue associated with them is declining, and the county's annual allocation is moving back towards a normal base. In recent years, my office has strategically developed the recommended budget to only budget Proposition 172 revenue to the level of proven stable growth, or base, and to set aside funds received in excess of the base for future year revenue stabilization or other one-time costs for public safety activities. The normal base allocation for the county is now estimated to be around $69 million. The fiscal year 16-17 departments, though, are budgeted to receive $78 million in allocation, or $9 million more than the base. Revenue is projected to decline over the next few years, as shown on this slide. We were anticipating that at least a 1% to 2% annual allocation reduction, in conjunction with the use of $4 to $5 million of designated funds annually over the next 3 years, which would exhaust the current designation and at that point require departments to operate at the base level. This would be a significant impact to the operations of public safety departments or require the county's general fund departments to absorb this loss along with all the other losses associated with oil and gas property declines. To be specific, the policy is in place that dictated our office's behavior with regard to Proposition 172 revenue. And I will read very briefly from Admin Procedures Manual, Chapter 8. In accordance with Government Code 30052, Proposition 172 sales tax revenue can only be used to fund public safety services. And on an annual basis, the county administrative office will determine a projected base value to use in budget development. The base value will only include proven stable growth. Any additional funds received in excess of the base will be set aside in a general designation within the Proposition 172 Special Revenue Fund for revenue stabilization and other one-time costs for public safety activities. It is very fortunate that your board adopted this policy because had all of these reserve dollars been spent imprudently, been spent earlier, been spent at one time, public safety departments would now be seeing an additional 3% cut.
Mr. Nyland, can I interrupt you for a quick second? Mr. Couch has a question.
Can you just describe this graph a little bit for my benefit and everyone else's, what those mean?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start at the very bottom legend, budgeted county revenue. That is a diamond, and it is the lowest line that you see on the slide, and that's called budgeted county revenue. So what we've tried to do is budget Proposition 172 revenue based on what we believe is a stable source of revenue. The next is the actual estimated county revenue, which is the solid square. And it's higher, as you can see, over the first few years and is declining now, which is matching what the budgeted county revenue is. So you can see that those two lines have confluenced and are moving down. And what that tells you is that what we believe the county revenue is going to be for Proposition 172 over the next 3 years is a decline. And we get most of our sales tax information from an organization called HDL, and a lot of local jurisdictions use them. Now, what's important is to look at the final triangle line, and that is the budgeted unit allocation. In other words, how much was actually budgeted. As you can see, in fiscal year 13-14, we actually budgeted more than we had received in estimated county revenue because prior to that, we had built up the reserves. Every time the line with the square goes above the line with the triangle is the areas where we are actually building reserves. Where you see the line with the square going below the line with the triangle is where we are making up lost revenue with these reserves so that we do not hurt operations of the departments. I don't know if that was clear enough for you. Very good. Any further questions on that?
Keep moving.
Keep moving.
Oh, excuse me, hold on. Mr. Maggard has one.
You know, if you have the full screen on your screen here, you can't get to your microphone button. So I'm now minimize the screen. You have no idea how nimble I am because nobody else in the world can tell. Okay, so on that graph, how much of that money do we have?
Well, the total for your Proposition 172 funds is right around, for fiscal year 16-17, around $79 million. That's what we are budgeting as revenue to be spread to the departments. We are expecting less than that in that fiscal year, somewhere in the $76 million range. So the difference of about $2 million, a little bit more than $2 million, is being made up because we have a reserve that we can tap in to make sure that those dollars are there.
And how much is that reserve?
Right now, it's close to $10 million, a little over $9 million.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So just to continue on, to make sure that I'm clear on this also, is that you have created through the years in this Prop 172 slide, a $10 million reserve of some sort. And the shot shows us that in 2016, you're going to spend $2 or $3 million of it. Then 2017-18, you're estimating to spend $10 million of it. Is that what it looks like? That's what this graph is showing me.
Yeah, we're expecting to use about $4 to $5 million in each of those 2 years.
And then it continues that you're going to draw down that $10 million reserve to zero?
Correct.
And so the end of this Prop 172 program, is there a sunset on this, or is it the end, or?
I don't know if there is a sunset. I do not believe there is by legislation. The proposition has a sunset. But these are resources that are intended only for Proposition 172. And, you know, I think it's one of those issues whenever you set something up with sales tax, you find yourself in this counterintuitive moment when you have the least amount of sales tax is often when people are committing crimes. And so that's when you have the least amount of resources for your public safety. We hope that this curve turns and we once again start growing our Prop 172 over the next, 5 years or so, where we can start to build up the reserve once again so that we can soften tough times like we're facing now.
So what I'm hearing you say is we'll look at this graph again next year, and it may show a different slope. Each of those lines may have different slopes, and we'll make adjustments as each year comes upon us.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Thank you. I think those questions are all. I don't see any others, so keep moving.
Thank you. This slide shows the progressive retirement and pension obligation bond escalation. As you will see, the pension costs continue to increase as a result of the amortization of the unfunded actuarial accrued liability and pension bond debt service increases, coupled with actuarial assumption changes approved by your KSARA board. The pension cost estimate continues to increase as deferred losses are amortized over, let me read that sentence over, excuse me. In English, yes. Actuarial is not my favorite word to pronounce, so I'm working hard here tonight. The pension cost is estimated to continue to increase as deferred losses are amortized for fiscal year 2017-18. Additionally, KSARA will conduct a 3-year experience study that could lead to a reduction in the assumed rate of return that is currently 7.5%. And other assumption changes would result in a retirement cost increase by as much as $23 million in fiscal year 2018-19, and that is shown in the last bar, and that's the clear bar. The fiscal year 16-17 recommended budget funds nearly $40 million in significant one-time costs, of which are funded with one-time sources such as fund balance carry forward. Major maintenance projects were added after year-end in the amount of $6.4 million, which are funded primarily from revenue, and only $277,000 in net county cost. $4.9 million was added in specific purpose contingencies that will be detailed on the next slide. Of particular note is $23.6 million of fund balance carry forward and $5.6 million in use of reserves and designations to help cover only a portion, I should say that, to help cover a portion of the remaining $30 million budget deficit to balance our budget this year. These are one-time resources being used to cover an ongoing problem requiring the 4-year deficit plan that we've talked about. For fiscal year 16-17, the recommended budget includes $4 million to accommodate unanticipated operational changes, legislative impacts, and other economic events affecting the county's operations that could not have been reasonably anticipated. $500,000 for other uncertainties departments may encounter, such as emergency maintenance projects and other unforeseen circumstances. And $4.9 million for specific purposes, which include $200,000 for animal services for potential spay-neuter activities, $4 million for potential uninsured litigation costs, and $675,607 for potential operating costs for Fire Station 13. While not included in the published recommended budget, $1.3 million is included in this presentation for potential academy costs, as the sheriff requested last week, for a total of $10.7 million. It is important to note that access to appropriations for contingencies requires a formal board action in open session with a 4/5 vote in concurrence. Contributions to nonprofits. Also included in the recommended budget are several contributions to nonprofit agencies totaling $294,303 for performance of cultural or humanitarian services benefiting the public. Due to budgetary constraints affecting the general fund, contribution allocations were recommended to the same organizations that received funding last fiscal year with a 50% allocation reduction. At the end of fiscal year 2015-16, the general fund had slightly more than $156 million in reserves and designations. The recommended budget includes $6.4 million in contributions and transfers of designations, most significantly $6 million for the Department of Human Services working capital, so we set aside funds for cash flow needs of that department. The cash flow at DHS fluctuates between $25 and $55 million at any point as a result of the funding mechanisms by the state for direct aid and administrative costs. Approximately $18.4 million in reserves are recommended for use in this budget. Most significantly is the use of $4.9 million to offset retirement cost increases and $6 million for transfer from KMC working capital to the Department of Human Services capital account. Nearly $6 million in reserves are proposed to be used for general fund operations. The recommended balance for the general fund reserves and designations totals nearly $145 million. As part of the fiscal year 2016-17 budget, my office has updated the 5-year projection of what will occur in the general fund in the absence of any mitigating actions or changing circumstances. As such, the county's fiscal plan highlights significant issues or problems that must be addressed in order to maintain a structurally balanced budget. For fiscal year 16-17, the annual deficit of $44.5 million identified in the fiscal plan was mitigated primarily through a 5% reduction of net general fund costs, the use of $29.1 million of general fund balance carry forward in reserves. Clearly, the next 3 years will be extremely challenging for the county. The deficits shown for fiscal year 2017-18 through 2019-20 are primarily the result of phasing in the $29.1 million of unresolved budget deficit from the current fiscal year over a 4-year period. My office will update the projection as information becomes available each fiscal year. Since 2014-15, the county has lost a total, as I mentioned, of $77 million in property tax revenue caused by the depressed market of oil, resulting in budget deficits of $44.5 million for the general fund and $17.5 million for the fire fund in fiscal year 2016. Resolving these shortfalls and balancing the budget would require 15% cuts for all general fund departments, assuming all departments received an equal cut, and a 7.2% cut for the fire department. The service level impacts of achieving those cost reductions in 1 year would be daunting for departments and for the public. Therefore, the recommended budget proposes phasing in the reductions over a 4-year period to allow management time to identify cost-saving measures, including use of position attritions to minimize or avoid layoffs, and where possible, finding other revenue sources such as grants or improved formula-driven state and federal allocations. The 4-year deficit mitigation plan calls for the temporary use of fund balance carry forward and reserves in addition to step downs for the department's net county cost allocations in order to bridge the budget gaps. The plan results in a stable budget environment with no reliance on one-time resource for operations after the 4-year period. For the general fund, the plan includes a 5% reduction proposed for the current fiscal year and requires further reductions of 5.5% in 2017-18, 2.7% for fiscal year 2018-19, and 2.2% for fiscal year 2019-20, again, if equally applied to all departments. The Board of Supervisors has been prudent in setting aside reserves and designations over the past 5 years that will be instrumental in the ability to phase in spending reductions. The challenge looking forward will be the difficult task of prioritizing county services and programs for reductions or deletion to achieve fiscal sustainability. My office will continue working with departments to prioritize discretionary programs for consideration of reduced funding and identify areas where savings could be achieved countywide as the next fiscal year budget is developed. A strategic approach to future reductions will be necessary to best sustain the board's priorities, goals, and objectives. My staff also prepared a 4-year plan for the fire fund that is similar to that of the general fund. It spreads the deficit over 4 years through a phased-in budget reduction. This plan will commit as much as $28.1 million in general fund reserves to offset fire fund shortfalls and requires a commitment by the fire department to identify and implement nearly $12 million in operational reductions by fiscal year 2020-2021. Approximately $20 million of the $28.1 million in general fund reserves needed for this plan are related to pension cost increases for the next 5 years until the 1995 pension obligation bond is paid off in fiscal year 2022-23. The ultimate goal of both my office and the fire chief has been and will continue to find cost savings, will continue to be to find cost savings through attrition and management efficiencies in lieu of layoffs. The department has identified several ways to reduce costs that it will be implementing either immediately or at the end of the fire season. A tentative agreement has been reached with the Kern County Firefighters Union that will help achieve this goal. By enforcing this plan of fiscal discipline, the fire department will be positioned to fully function within its means within 5 years. There's been some concern from the public that the 4-year deficit mitigation plan would deplete the county's reserves to levels that would not be prudent. Your board has been extremely diligent about setting one-time funds aside for future use over the last 5 years. It has resulted in a prudent level of reserves in the general fund. While it is not ideal to reduce them for fiscal stabilization, it makes sense for our county to utilize some of these resources on a temporary planned basis in order to restabilize our resources. The general fund ended the fiscal year with a total of $156 million in established reserves and designations, and the fiscal year 2016-17 budget proposes to use a net of $12 million as discussed on a slide earlier. The estimated use under the mitigation plan is $29.5 million for fiscal year 17-18, $24.8 million for fiscal year 18-19, $10.2 million for fiscal year 19-20, and finally $2 million in fiscal year 2021. Over a 5-year period, reserves would decline by $78.5 million or 50%, leaving a remaining balance of $78.1 million. Your board has been very clear that the 10% general reserve is to be maintained. In addition, the CAO recommends to retain a cash loan account for the Department of Human Services and a tax litigation reserve at a minimum. If your board reduces reserves to move funds into appropriations for contingencies for the Sheriff's Academy in the amount of $1.3 million, the estimated remaining balance over the 5-year period would decline to $76.8 million or 51%. On January 27, 2015, your board declared a fiscal emergency as a proactive budgetary measure to mitigate a $50 million shortfall in property taxes from oil and gas properties as a result of the market value of oil. This was a concern for both the general and fire fund that rely heavily on property taxes to fund operations. The declaration allows for your board to access general fund general reserves anytime throughout the year and provides staffing flexibility for the fire fund if cost reductions are necessary. As the county continues to face daunting reductions with deficits of $44.5 million for the general fund and $17.5 million for the fire fund, my office would recommend that your board reaffirm the fiscal emergency status declared in 2015. As you know, the county has only mitigated about 1/3 of the deficit it currently faces. Besides the loss of oil and gas property taxes, the county is facing other challenges. The Kern County Employee Retirement Association, or KCERA, will phase out the prepayment option completely in fiscal year 2017-18, resulting in a total loss of discretionary revenue of $8 million over 2 years. As I mentioned earlier, the Retirement Board will also conduct a 3-year experience study that could result in assumption changes further impacting retirement costs, as shown in the slide, as great as $25 million. We continue to be concerned about the state's prediction of a looming recession, and there are impacts to budgets with a 15% minimum, or $15 minimum wage increase, and the loss of gas taxes that will severely limit local road maintenance. The impact of the $15 minimum wage may be up to $17 million for the County of Kern. The new jail is on the road to opening in fiscal year 17-18, fully operational. The cost for medical and mental health could be up to $5 million that will need to be addressed, and the backfill of costs for detention officers the sheriff currently has vacant, unfunded, to meet the constraints and operate the jail. And finally, we cannot forget that 18% of the county's general fund is reliant on sales and use tax revenue that is volatile, demanding that we be vigilant and carefully watching the ebbs and flows of these resources over the periods of time. Proposition 172 funds that are included in this are a perfect example of how the county becomes reliant on a resource at a level that may not be sustainable. In summary, the fiscal year 16-17 recommended budget is balanced under the 4-year deficit mitigation program. It is imperative to understand the county is still in a fiscal crisis. Only $15.3 million of the $44.5 million deficit is resolved on an ongoing basis for the general fund, and only $9.2 million of the $17.5 million is resolved for the fire fund. This leaves $29 million and $8 million, respectively, still outstanding. Holding all departments to this first 5% reduction is vital to moving towards fiscal stability, especially as we know next year will be even more difficult. To phase in reductions over 4 years will cost the county 50% of its current reserves and will minimize the ability of the county to fund major maintenance projects. Economic challenges related to a recession predicted by the state, minimum wage increases, and funding of local roads maintenance are still valid concerns. More than ever, the county needs strong fiscal discipline to achieve fiscal sustainability. Adopting this budget will begin the process of getting there. And that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Nylon. Before I open it up for public comment, I'll ask the board members if you have any specific questions that you'd rather have addressed now. Mr. Maggart, I see you, and I see Mr. Couch will follow you. Go ahead, Mr. Maggart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions about your presentation. Thank you very much. Thorough, and I'm sure most people who are hearing it for the first time are completely drowning in the level of information you gave them. But the 2 specific questions are, what is the criterion that we must meet in order to declare a fiscal emergency? And there was an argument being made that it meant that if we weren't insolvent, if the sum of all of our assets were exceeded by the sum of all of our debts, that if we were not insolvent, we could not declare a fiscal emergency. I don't believe that is accurate, but that was an idea that was thrown about for a while. So could somebody clarify for us that what the definition of a fiscal emergency is and whether or not we meet that threshold?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, council asked for a minute, so maybe we could go to question number 2 and then go back to number 1.
Thank you. I've not talked to a single rep from SEIU about this, but I heard in the media, and it might be completely wrong, I heard in the media that some locals for SEIU had requested that their members that are subject to their negotiated contracts be exempt from the $15 an hour minimum wage if they were subject to a contract that specified a certain rate per hour, that they could have that rate, and even if it was less than 15. Is that not accurate?
And Supervisor Maggard, the chair, that is not what we've heard, and it would be unlikely that a contract could overturn state law.
State law. Very good. So $15 an hour will become the minimum wage for every employee in Kern County?
Correct.
That works for the county of Kern, at least?
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you.
And council is now almost ready to answer. Is there a question from another board member, and we can return to your question?
Thanks. Let's try that. Mr. Couch?
Thank you. Maybe a couple. Go back to your, if you would, your slide. I think it's number 12, the countywide pension costs. Can you remind us what we're doing and how you're handling the increases specifically for 17, 18, and 18, 19 in future budgets?
Yeah, Supervisor Couch, I'd ask Nancy to give you, your assistant CEO for Budget and Finance to give you the specifics, but I believe it was last year your board authorized our office to create a 7-year plan where we would use reserves that we put away to slowly help offset the cost of those pension obligation increases so that departments are not feeling those, or at least not feeling them as dramatically as they could be. Those reserves will be depleted probably a little before the pension obligation bond is retired, but we're hoping that that will soften the blow. And I don't, Ms. Lawson, do you have anything to add to that? And the estimated 18-19 that you see at 308, that is if they change the rate of return, and that is not included in any plan that we have to offset costs to the county
That
departments.
is if they move to lower it once again?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the 23 million. That is correct.
Thank you. I'll come back to that. Thank you.
And, drum roll, council is now prepared to respond to that first question.
Well, how
I'm sorry.
about we ask that question again, Mr. Maggart, and then give the answer.
Happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To clarify the question, what is the legal definition of the facts that we must meet in order to declare a fiscal emergency?
Thank you. I thought you might ask that question, so I did research that. Unfortunately, I did not print out my statute that relied upon it. The legal justification for the declaration of a fiscal emergency is found in the Government Code, and Government Code Section 29086 requires the declaration of an emergency, quote, as defined in Section 29127 of the Government Code, in order to establish, cancel, increase, or decrease the general reserve at any time other than the adoption of the budget. With respect to what can be a fiscal emergency, that is contained in Government Code Section 29127, and it provides that after adopting a resolution stating the facts constituting the emergency by a 4/5 vote, the board at any regular or special meeting, the board may appropriate and make the expenditure necessary to meet an emergency in any of the following cases. 1, for the immediate preservation or order of public health. 2, to meet mandatory expenditures required by law. Further, immediate reductions in general fund and fire fund appropriations have become necessary to mitigate the loss of resources and to adjust and otherwise preserve service levels. That's another basis for finding a fiscal emergency. And then finally, access to and a decrease in the general reserve may be necessary to preserve public health and public protection services and to meet mandatory expenditures required by the law, given the need to reduce the general fund and fire fund appropriations due to a decline in assessed valuation. So those are all criteria that can be used in order to make a legal finding within Government Code Section 29127. And based on the facts that Mr. Nylon has presented to your board, you are well within your legal authority to make such a finding for this year.
Thank you. So I want to make sure that's clear and on the record. And when we are asked to make that declaration going forward, can you please make sure that one of your comments to us is whether or not we have met that foundational threshold that's necessary for us to make that declaration?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, I would be pleased to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maggart. Before we go to the public, I got a couple questions. Mr. Nylon, you're going to read this same brief tomorrow morning?
Mr. Chairman, painfully yes.
Okay, great. My second question is on page 5. Put that up so people can look at it.
Madam Clerk, thank you.
Thank you. My understanding, the way that I just want to reiterate so people understand that we're looking at right now a total deficit of $62 million. We're trying to come up with a budget this year that's going to cover about 24.5 million of that, and the outstanding balance still remaining on our existing deficit then is that 37.5 million.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And that is the cause of the thing that's making us go do this 4-year plan, is to come up with the coverage for that $37.5 million.
That is correct.
Thank you. I got 2 more questions. I'll be real quick here. On slide number 12, are the adjustments to the rate of return included in this graph?
There are,
future possible adjustments that KSAR board may make?
Mr. Chairman, you'll see that in the far right bar is the possible impact of a change in the rate of return.
Great. So your budget and this year and your future years to cover that existing $37.5 million, going back to slide number 5, is based on a prognostication or forecast that the price of oil will be what in the future?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I believe that we projected it to be in the low 40s.
So it's now in the low 40s. So this budget is looking at a 4-year plan, provided that these numbers will remain relatively stable, provided the price of a barrel of oil remains in that zone, low 40s.
That is correct.
And so we do not in this budget, nor in this 4-year plan, have taken into account the possibility of the price of a barrel of oil falling even further.
That is correct.
Or rising. Correct. So if it rises, the out years will improve. If it falls, the out years will get worse.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions before we open the public session? Seeing none, let's open the public hearing and let's hear what you have to say. Can I have a raise of hands? How many people would like to comment on this evening's discussion? Good. Outstanding. If you could make your way down toward the front, please. We'll take our time. We'll go through it. And now's a chance for you to speak. Mr. Delamato, did you have your hand up? Did you want to comment? You led us with the pledge, so you get first dibs.
Thank you.
Please identify, just say your name, and then go for it.
My name is Terry Delamater, and 50 years ago, when I was 21 years old, state mandates did not prohibit arresting thieves. Gangs, terrorists, and drug abusers were not an issue 50 years ago. Kern County's quality of life is at risk if we do not maintain law and order. We need the best and most capable law enforcement personnel possible. Because law enforcement is a dangerous, high-risk profession, we need competitive compensation that will attract applicants from other counties, as well as a waiting list for Kern's training. Future law enforcement budgets must be substantially increased, and right now, we need to provide the requested funding of the sheriff and district attorney. Please do whatever it takes to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Chairman Gleason, members of the board. My name is Lauren Skidmore with Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government. Before I begin, I do just want to say that if anyone from the audience that noticed the pension slide is something of internal interest, as a member of the KSARA board, we would love all of you to be more involved in KSARA. And so in the future, when the assumed rate of return vote does come up, public members should be interested in expressing their opinion on that item. We do support today the current plan to cut 5% across all departments. I would like to address that these are tough economic times, but we believe that this is a reality we must face. We cannot drain our reserves to allow status quo operations, and we cannot always mitigate each and every gap. The dollars are just not there. Because if it isn't oil tomorrow, it could be agriculture and construction. On a side note, I attended a hearing for oil and gas in Sacramento last week, and let me tell you, the rest of the state is very naive about all we do here in Kern County, and we'll continue to hit our two main industries. A few things we have identified as Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government. We support the departments who are looking at lean strategies. Mental health and personnel are two. There are two additional departments who are interested in the process, and we applaud them for their potential efforts. We support fiscal year 16-17 being a year where the county can take extra time to look deeper into department budgets to potentially prioritize and strategize with your board. We would like overtime addressed and encouraged overtime be only allowed in required or limited circumstances. I've communicated some concerns regarding the sheriff's 53 trainee positions to the county administrative office, and thank you CEO Nylon and Analyst Curry for addressing our concerns. We hope these positions, if approved, are considered in the sheriff's budget plan and plan cuts necessary for fiscal year 17 and 18. And lastly, I would like to commend CEO Nylon and Nancy Lawson and each of their staff for their work on the budget, as well as your board for stocking away reserves in times that you weren't expecting to be able to use them. If we can be of any assistance to any department or board, we would be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skidmore.
My name is Susan Bennett, Kern Humane Society. First of all, I appreciate the work that goes into planning a budget. I've been sitting, as I told you, for 40 years watching budgets. This is one of the leanest in probably 20 years that you've had to deal with. One of the reasons is all of the funds that were devoted 3 years ago toward your new jail. All this talk about, oh, the sheriff's not getting enough money to do anything. Well, he got a lot of money, and that's part of your budget problems. So I really get kind of frustrated listening to that. Please, I think the 5% can be done by all the departments. It cuts, but it doesn't hurt. It's next year that we worry about. Remember that we do have other 5-year plans. One of them is to go to a no-kill shelter within the next 4. Now we're putting Mr. Cullen on the spot, but within the next 4 years, as long as we continue to support him. So just go with that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Yes.
Oh.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr.
Ms. Bennett, I appreciate your steadfastness in your efforts to help us control the explosion of animal population and trying to get towards a no-kill shelter. I saw in the news this evening before I came down here that the city of Bakersfield is looking at participating in a program with 4 or 5 other cities in the country. It's an educational program, but bottom line is it's a program that's bringing in new resources to try to reach a 90% adoption return of animals and basically become a no-kill city. Could you, and you're involved in our Animal Control Commission, I believe, are you not?
I attend the meetings, but I am not a commissioner.
I would ask you to discuss with your friends what they know about that, and let's make sure that you discuss it with Mr. Cullen, and let's see if there's what opportunities there might be there.
I think Mr. Cullen has done an excellent job of reaching out, and anything that's possible will be something he'll be. I can guarantee you he'll be interested in it.
Thank
but
you.
We'll be glad to talk to him as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett.
Good evening, Chair Gleason, honorable members of the board, Ms. Kraus, Mr. Nylon, Ms. Goldner, Ms. Lawson. I am Liz Keogh, K-E-O-G-H, proud resident of an unincorporated neighborhood in the 5th District. If I may address Supervisor Maggard's comments first, I'm presuming that what you saw, which I didn't, was a result of today's Legislative and Litigation Committee meeting this morning.
It wasn't. Either you or your double was in attendance.
Yeah. There are some things I wish my double would handle, but this one I was there. And there was some discussion about going to what's called Target Zero, which has worked with shelters in those other areas. They are not going to combine programs here with them. But it is not quite a no-kill program, as was discussed. And I think Sue Bennett is correct that Mr. Cullen, I know that the council people and staff there did talk about talking with the county about what's going on, although they're not real excited about that. Well, speaking of animals, in the budget document, under Animal Services, as Mr. Nylund pointed out to me some weeks ago, on page whatever it is, I didn't have time to print out what I wanted. It does say that $200,000 is planned to be allocated from the contingency fund for spay-neuter vouchers. Then I turn to the page where it says contingency fund in the printed budget, and there are 2 lines, I think, maybe 3. One of the lines says contingency fund, $7 million. There was, until this evening, to my knowledge, no specific encumbrance made for the contingency fund against anything. However, I notice on the handout of your nice slides that appropriations for contingencies includes the $200,000 for animal services. Now, we all know what contingency means. It means kind of if. What, and I believe you mentioned it tonight, Mr. Nylund, if the board wishes to include anything listed in this contingency array, then they can do so, and it needs to pass the board with a 4 out of 5 vote. Is that correct? Do they need to make a special motion to do this, or is that by default included in the motion for the budget tomorrow?
Ms. Keough, you'll direct the questions to the board, and then we'll refer them back. So, Mr. Nylund, would you please care to answer Ms. Keough?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as I understand Ms. Keough's question is, if your board places $200,000 in appropriations for contingencies, and that's not an if, that is an actual category, and your board has that authority. If then the Director of Animal Services wants to access that, he can come forward to your board and through a board letter, like he would do in many other situations, ask for the use of that, and it does require a 4/5 vote. That's just how the process works.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keough. Next up.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions, members of the board. And I'll start off with them, mark them as we went through it.
Did you say your name, sir?
Oh, I'm Dennis Fox. Yeah, we have a vacant one on the transcript. I was wondering about the, on page 4, initial impacts. Could that, some of that be turned over to the feds, the animal services, the spay and neuter? I'm not talking about expanding it to county employees to cut down costs of, no, I was getting at a county trapper. Could that be used?
Mr. Fox, why don't we do this? Why don't we go through your questions, speak your questions, and then we'll get answers.
Yeah, county trappers. Second one, the library. If you close some of the branches, can you bring the books in and then lease the library out? Some of the libraries that you do currently have very high rents, especially the Southwest. I'd like to go over to question that I have of you is the contribution to nonprofits. Now, I'm not saying don't. I just was wondering how you arrive at $46,360 for 4 of them and 10% of that for another one. I was just wondering how you drive it. Is it cost-driven, or is it just kind of a standard formula that you have, or maybe you want to look at? And not that much into it. Some of the future challenges that are mentioned would be, the stuff about the air district and the car being taken over by the EPA and demanding this, that, and the other as a possible challenge. And I feel like Jeremiah for bad news here, but that I think you're aware of that. One of the things I was wondering is about the jail operations. What is the difference between the cost of a sheriff who become also almost part-time lawyers or lawyer aides? It's necessary to train them, compared to a detention officer, the amount of salary difference, and could that be expanded to the courts, where they mainly are providing security rather than have to do all the things that the regular sheriffs have to do on the street. Some of the counties, they have what they call marshals that work the courts. The courts don't, I don't think judges would appreciate it, but, you know, it's we're getting a little desperate here. And it's just, those are the main ones that I see. And how much of the federal fire funds you can get under the Weeks Act.
What did you just say?
Pardon?
What did you just say?
Oh.
Fire fund you're talking about?
Some of it a lot of it comes from the state. It comes from the federal government to the state, and then from the state it comes to the locals. And we are a contract county to the state. I think there's about 7 or 8 of them. And sometimes they're able to use the helicopters for the sheriff, and there's also the sheriff, also the same helicopters for the fire funds too. So you're able to get some more funding there.
Mr. Fox, you got some good questions. I'm going to try to get to all of those. Are you done, sir, with the questions?
Yeah, that'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I volunteer to be the trapper. I think that'd be a great job. But Mr. Nyland, could you take a stab at some of the questions from Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Fox?
I'd be pleased to. And when I first started with the county in 1985 as an analyst, we actually had a Kern County trapper position.
Did you trap foxes?
We trapped all sorts of things.
Look out, Mr. Fox.
All right, so with regard to animal control, we are required to provide animal control services. If it were only so easy as to tell the federal government they must provide services we don't care to provide, unfortunately we just can't do that. Yes, it's true that books can be moved around library branches based on their needs. The nonprofit organizations were funded over a period of time at their different levels based on the need at the time. The cuts this year are 50% cut across the board. The Air district issue does not apply to our county budget. The detentions officers and the deputy sheriffs that has been analyzed over a number of years, there's a lot of discussion that those costs are similar. We know that our sheriff prefers to have as many deputies as possible because he can then use them for other purposes, and so it's a pretty even cost. I believe that the courts are required to have deputies and not detention officers, and so I don't think that's within our ability to change. And I know that we do receive federal funds and state funds for fire services. Often they're there to reimburse costs, although we do get grants from time to time. And I know the fire chief's here if you want a more specific answer, but I think those answers, that answers your questions or his questions in general.
Thanks, Nyland. Mr. Fox, it does answer. I had to kind of trap a library leasing, nonprofit allocations, jail operations, and helicopter operations. I think he touched on your questions. If he didn't, and you have other questions, would you please, after the meeting, grab on Mr. Nylon and let us know if something that we didn't. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Fox. I want to get to all your questions, is what I'm trying to tell you. We will get you satisfactory answers. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Come on up. Please state your name.
My name is Dina Blankenship. Grateful to be here. That is D-E-A-N-N-A, Blankenship, B-L-A-N-K-E-N-S-H-I-P. And I just wanted to come tonight to show you guys and thank you personally for receiving services through AB 109. I am a recovering addict that is very active in the community, and I wanted to speak and let you guys see that program did work. According to Kern County Probation, they fund $1.6 million a year for 400 slots in the DRC, which is a recovery service daily reporting center. The DRC reduces recidivism. In a 2013 study, they tracked recidivism rates of 100 probationers versus a control group of people that were not in that DRC. Of the 50% of the non-DRC participants that committed new crimes and 30% of the DRC graduates that didn't. 30% of the new crimes committed by non-participants were felonies versus the 14% of new crimes committed by participants of the DRC graduates. What I want to say is each conviction was estimated to cost $37,512, both direct county cost and indirect costs, not including housing costs at Kern County Jail or at state facilities. I am now working in recovery at Freedom House, and I have been on both sides of the fence. I was incarcerated at the time Prop 47 went through, and now that I work in recovery, I also see on this side how critical the AB 109 funding and the public safety is to, our public safety it's crucial. The recovery service is available. It's basically what I want to say is that the second years in the counties must increase connections between recovery and mental health services, demonstrated to reduce future offending substance abuse disorder, mental health needs, and research suggests that counties that invest more in re-entry and daily reporting centers experience better public safety outcomes. If local criminal justice and health agencies can focus on solutions and rather than disciplining the problem, that we might have better outcomes, and there will be better, your money would go to, if you do it in recovery, because of this new Prop 47, people are more, they're not being incarcerated, they're being let out, and that would lead to more crimes being committed. But if we can get that channeled through recovery and actually find a solution to the problem rather than disciplining the problem, I think that we all could agree that that would be where the money would be better spent.
Ms. Blankenship, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
You say you volunteer at the recovery center, or you work at the bar?
I am a home manager at Freedom House, and I also have, I hold a public relations position at the DRC. I am the only graduating participant that was offered a position on the community advisory board there.
Are you familiar with our current Stop Meth Now program?
Yes.
Okay, if Mr. Walker's in the back there and he's actively manages that program, and anything you can do to, your experiences in that area would be a big help to us, because as you know more than anybody, Drug addiction is destroying our neighborhoods,
Yes,
and
it
our
is.
schools, and our churches, and your help is critical to the success. So if you could just stay in close contact with Mr. Walker, and if you want to go on the road, hit Kern River Valley, I'd love to have you up, bring you up there, and have you give a presentation at Jim's.
I would be more than willing and grateful to be a part of that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming this evening, Mr. Blankenship. Mr. Couch. Hold on, Mrs. Blankenship.
I just want to thank you for coming and having the courage to speak out. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Chambers. My name is Elaine Vargas, and I am here on the behalf of many recovering addicts in Kern County, and I'm also here with Deanna Blankenship. I am a graduate of your AB 109 and a product of the funding that went through that program. I graduated and I went through West Care. I've been clean for almost 4 years. In December, it'll be 4 years, and I'm an active member of Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm also an active member in the community as well. And I just want to let you know that that time and time again, when we encounter individuals with a drug problem, I've seen both sides of the coin here. I've seen society label the disease of addiction as a crime, and then I've also been a product and been able to treat the disease with treatment and not be approached as someone that just chooses to wake up one day and commit a crime. We suffer from the disease of addiction, and unfortunately, there's not a magic pill, there's not a psychiatrist, there's not a special abracadabra wand that you can wave over us, and it's all going to get better. And I just want to read something to you guys. Before I got clean, I could not manage my own lives. I could not live and enjoy life as other people do. I had to have something different, and I had thought that I had found it in drugs. I placed the use of my drugs ahead of my family, my children, and I had to have drugs at all costs. I did many great people harm, but most of all, I harmed myself. Through my inability to accept responsibilities, I was actually creating my own problems. I seemed to be incapable of facing life on its own terms. I realized that in my addiction, I was slowly committing suicide, but addiction is such a cunning enemy in life that I had lost all the power to do anything about it. I ended up in jail or sought help through medicine, religion, and psychiatry. None of these methods was sufficient for me. My disease always resurfaced or continued to progress until in desperation, I sought help from another member in Narcotics Anonymous or through your drug treatment programs that you fund. After coming to these programs, I realized that I was a sick person. I suffered from a disease from which there is no known cure. It can, however, be arrested, and at some point, recovery is then possible. On the behalf of every recovering addict, and from an addict that wants help and truly wants to treat my disease of addiction, that I'm completely powerless, I'm asking that you continue to fund your programs because they do work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. I'd like to take you up to Kern River Valley, too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. The AB 109 body that has been tasked with solving these challenges and rewriting sort of how we do things with law enforcement and treating addiction and rehabilitation emphasis is really been carefully managed and maintained by a group of people that are here today that I'd really like to acknowledge. Mr. T.R. Miracle, who I like to say is our evidence-based genius, really respected around the state with turning around our sort of probation ideology, if you will, in terms of, or methodology rather, in terms of really focusing on providing opportunities for folks that are ready to turn their lives around and are honest about their condition. And so TR, I see our mental health director here, also Bill Walker, who we got to hear from earlier. Lisa Green is not here with us tonight, but Scott Spielman is here on her behalf and often represents her there. And we have a really remarkable team of folks that are really on the cutting edge of just
tweaking the way we do business enough to give opportunities, invest resources, and determine the best way to really treat what is a really devastating sickness, as we know. And so it's exciting to know this board are big fans of what's happening with that body, and that budget gets approved by this body. So it comes back to this board. I'm there all the time. I'm sure I've seen you there a number of times. I represent this board to the AB 109 Community Corrections Partnership. So we are learning to do things better all the time, and you are evidence of that. And it is very exciting to see you here and demonstrating to this board and to the public that these investments have real payoffs in real time, and as evidenced by your family, your children, and the betterment of your life and your future. So thank you for being here. So critical. Keep up the good work. You're why we do it, so hats off. And of course to the team that I think I mentioned, everyone that's here. If I missed somebody, forgive me, but it really is a great team of folks that are making real progress in the area of addiction treatment and learning how to be better at all of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Anyone else? Okay, I see none here. We have no requests for remote testimony, so I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. But before I go that, is there any board members who would like to comment on things that we've discussed?
Wow, that was fast.
Supervisor Couch.
Mr. Nyland, this is more about tomorrow's hearing and procedures. There's a possibility that we could use some community development block grant funds for some specific expenditures, specifically in the Sheriff's Department. And there may be discussion about the Prop 172 funds. If we decided that we wanted to utilize some of those funds, specifically the CDBG funds, is tomorrow the time to do it, or would you suggest we come back with a plan of mid-year, or not mid-year, but a budget adjustment in a month or so?
Supervisor Couch to the chair. Yeah, I don't believe that has been fully developed at this stage, so we would love if this board directs us to go back and do the research, to come back working with your planning director and make a proposal for your consideration at a later date.
And one other question about that. If we, let's take the CDBG stuff for a moment. I'd like County Council to weigh in on this, and you may not be able to do it now, but if we're going to allocate funds that the board would like spent for a specific purpose in a specific department, can we do that, specifically the Sheriff's Department, can we do that much like we are contemplating doing for the Academy, where we set it in a designation?
Supervisor Couch to the chair, I have researched that issue, and my preliminary conclusion is that yes, you can do that with some limitations on it. I would like to meet with the planning director and the CAO to vet it more thoroughly, but it depends on levels of service and what's been provided earlier and what the need is, and it needs to be within the criteria of how CDBG funds can be spent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Any other questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn until tomorrow morning at 0900.
Motion.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.